Dad would talk a lot about the fact that you have to remember to get out your blinders and put them on. Because you're going to be tested. You already have been. As we just heard with Rusty, perseverance. That's one of the most important qualities you can exhibit. Yet, part of perseverance is you're tested, like Abe Lincoln was, we just heard. And sometimes when you're tested, you have to think about, what do I do? How do I stay focused? Well, Dad would say, you got to get out your blinders and put them on. I remember when I started my first job, and I was the 22-year-old graduate, he decided to come down I was working in Kansas City, Missouri, and I was the first person in my family to work in an office. All my sisters had been stay-at-home moms, and my brothers were all in the meat business. So I was working in an office down at Country Club Plaza. And I'm down there, and Dad decides he wants to come take me to lunch. And I thought, okay, that's great. Frankly, though, it was Hyde House Day on Friday, and I was a little bit worried about what he'd wear. But he came down, he was all dressed so nice, and he took me to lunch, and he says, how's it going? Do you like your job? I said, I love it, Dad. I love the work I do. You're right. Pouring the comeback sauce on people really helps, and I'm always mindful about the impression I make when I meet someone for the first time. Yet I don't really like the people I work with very much. And he said, you don't? And I said, no. I said, I love the work I do, but, and he said, anytime you say the word but, you negated everything in front of it. So what's the problem? I said, well, and I worked for a manager. She was only a few years older than I was, and she would remind you a little bit of maybe a Paris Hilton type. She was a real partier. She was always late for work in the morning. She was always worried about where she was going to go the next night. And I worked next to my partner at the desk was someone who was kind of like the mom in the 70s show. She was really worried about planning her daughter's wedding. That was what she was all about when she wasn't working. So I'm between the two of them, the recent graduate from Kansas State University. And when one of them walked out the door, that other one was talking about her. And when she walked out the door, she was talking about her. And when I walked out the door, I knew they were talking about me. Because that's just the way our office was hardwired. So it wasn't really very fun. And I told Dad this, and he said, well, you got to get out your blinders and put them on. I said, okay, Dad. Tell me again, what do you mean by that? How would I use that in business? Another farm story. He said, well, when I grew up in Eudora, Kansas, my dad would always tell me that. Boy, get out your blinders and put them on. You're focused on everything else but where you're headed, the work you need to do. You don't need to, the blinders are all about, you don't need to worry about what's going on out that way or that way, and you don't let things get in that shouldn't. You focus on the destination, where you're headed, whatever your goal is. And he said, I used it in business after I hired Hank. I said, after you hired Hank? I knew Hank. He said, yeah, the meat market had been going really well for years. And then I hired Hank, and things weren't going so well anymore, and I didn't understand how come. So I started asking. People were questioning me right and left. How come he gets paid more, John? How come he gets off Saturday, John? How come he gets the new set of knives, John? He said, I turned and I said, how come you're how coming me? It used to be you were okay with how much you were paid, or the fact that you had to work Saturday. You used to be okay with all this. How come this is a problem now? I don't understand. Well, Hank said where he used to work, and Hank said this, and Hank said that. So I decided I better take Hank across the street to the barbecue and have a little conversation with Hank. So I sat across from him and I said, Hank, I'm so happy you're here. You're one of the best with a knife I've ever seen, and I tell you, I really want you to stay here. That said, Hank, notice he didn't say but. That said, Hank, I want to tell you something. I need you to get out your blinders and put them on. Hank said, what are you talking about, John? He said, I'm getting a lot of people second-guessing me right and left around here lately. And when I ask how come, it usually is all about something you might have mentioned. Some food for thought you put in their brain. Well, I want you to look across the street here. See across the street, the door? Right over the door it says Bicklemeyer Meat Company, Johnny's Market. Who's got that last name? Me. If you got a problem with me, Hank, I'd appreciate it if from now on you'd come talk to me about it. I need you to get out your blinders and put them on. Remember, you're focused on the destination, making sure you do the best you possibly can for Bicklemeyer Meats, for Johnny Bicklemeyer, that's me. So if you got a problem with me, I'd appreciate it if you'd come to me and talk to me directly about it. I learned more about leadership than all the textbooks I ever read from that one story that my dad told me. Why? What's the first thing he said to Hank? I'm so proud of you, just as I am on my children. The first thing he said was, I'm happy you're here. I want you to be here. This is what you got to do to stay here. And being in the staffing industry as long as I've been, I've seen too many times people are so quick to bring someone and fire them when they do something that they don't like, when they second guess them. What would happen to Hank? if that would have been what my dad did. He probably would have been that revolving door going from place to place, stirring up trouble wherever he went. Instead, my dad took the time to talk to him, to tell him what he wanted him to do, and don't think he didn't continue to coach him when his blinders fell off in the future, because they did. And I'll tell you, from my personal experience, the blinders is the hardest one. We all like to get into the gossip, right? But if you, as graduates, in every single thing you do from now on, try to focus more often than not on getting out your blinders and put them on, I think you're going to set the kind of example for the people that you work with that you want to set. And I think you're going to be as successful as you want to be if you focus on that more often than not. And when they do fall off, and they will, just raise your hand, put it down, and get back to playing the game. Admit your mistakes, as Dad would say. The second part that I think my dad shared with me that was so helpful for me as I was kind of going through the whole perseverance and finding my way through my career was he told me about the blinders. He talked about raising your hand, putting it down, and get back to playing the game when you make a mistake. But the third thing he said was, you got to realize that some things are just over the L. Over the L? I'll tell you this story. I was 25 years in my career. The CEO of my company, who I reported to, was ousted by the board. He was told that he needed to leave the company because he wanted to take it private. He was my mentor, my go-to person at work. And I wasn't very happy with what was going on above me. I liked the people who worked for me, and I liked the people I worked with, but I didn't like upstairs anymore. I didn't like the decisions they were making. So I asked Dad to go to lunch. We went to a little Prairie Village. There's a little restaurant there called Blue Moose, and we bellied up to the bar, and I started whining about work. And while I was whining about work, I had a couple glasses of wine. And the bartender was listening to our conversation, and Dad looked at me and he said, "There's nothing good you can say about your work right now?" I said, "Not really. I don't like what's happening upstairs." He said, "You don't like anything about them upstairs?" I said, "Nope." He said, "Well, they're still paying you, aren't they?" "Yeah, they are, Dad." He said, "You just need to realize what's going on is going on upstairs. It's over the L. And then when you realize that, you're going to be happier." "What are you talking about? It's over the L, Dad?" Bartender's looking, what's he talking about? He said, 1951 in Kansas City, Kansas, there was a flood. The meat market, all summer long, meat market's right in the bottoms, right down by the river. And he said they'd been telling us there might be a flood, but all of a sudden the National Guard swoops in and we didn't get any notice really. The levees had broken upstream and flood water was about to come and we were escorted out. 1951, drive home to the house in Shawnee. All the kids that were out there. He said, we all go to bed. The next morning, I hear your mom, one television, 1951 in the family room. I hear your mom crying, looking at the television screen, and saying, "It's over the L, John, come quick, it's over the L." I walked out and I looked up at the television set and it was over the L. And the bartender says, "What was over the L?" He said, "The floodwaters." He said, "Your mom's crying, it's over the L." And he goes, up the hill on the television set, we could see up the hill from the meat market was a grocery store. And it was up the hill from the meat market. And on top of that grocery store was a vertical sign. And the vertical sign said MILGRAMS, Milgrams. And the water was over the L. So where do you think the meat market was? "So your mom's crying, it's over the L." And I look at her, and my mom's name was Mary. And I said, "Mary, let's go back to bed. It's over the L." And I looked at him, and I said, "Oh, gosh, is that why they call Jerry the flood baby? Oh, that's so bad." No matter how old you all are thinking about that, your parents, not good. I looked at him, and I said, "Dad, your life's work, the business that you worked so hard to start, it's underwater right now. And what you choose to think about is I get to sleep in for a change or whatever you did." He said, "That's the point, Mary T. That's what I chose to think about. What else was I going to think about? It was over the L." And the minute you realize that so many things you worry about, those people up the stairs and the decisions they make at your work, they're just over the L. The minute you realize that, the happier you're going to be. Because Mary T, some things are just over the L.